Maybe
she is,
not.
right? Speaking of interest rates, what about the Fed? And what about whether or not we'll see those rates go up in the next several weeks or so? Peter Barnes is joining us live from Washington covering that side of the story. Peter?
Well, hey, Jenna, that's right. The two things that have been rocking these financial markets have been China and the Fed, because despite the slowing Chinese economy, its plunging stock markets and other economic problems, all of which could hurt the U.S. economy and U.S. economic growth. We have a chorus of Fed officials saying the Fed should start raising interest rates soon for the first time since the financial crisis, and that could hurt the economic recovery. Just yesterday, Dennis Lockhart, the president of the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta, said that while China and other factors could be headwinds to growth here, he still sees the U.S. economy growing moderately. He said, quote, consistent with this picture, I expect the normalization of monetary policy, that is interest rates, to begin sometime this year. Another Fed Bank president, James Bullard, said on Friday he thinks the Fed remains on track to increase rates at its policy meeting next month. Also on Friday, Jeffrey Lacker of the Richmond Fed announced he'll give a speech next week titled "The Case Against Further Delay." What do you think he's going to say? Well, many analysts now think that with all of this economic turmoil, the Fed will ultimately decide to delay increasing interest rates, at least until things settle down, at least until they're sure that the U.S. economy remains on a decent growth track. One plus for the economy that could help is this sharp drop in oil prices, which could cut energy costs and gasoline costs for average consumers, giving them more money to spend on other stuff, which could help support economic growth. Jenna?
A big story for us today. Peter, thank you.
You bet.
Trump's plans are not grounded in conservative principles. It would cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It's not realistic. It won't be implemented. And we need border security to be able to deal with getting this country back on track. So I'm not going to get into the issues of what he said and I said. The simple fact is that his proposal is unrealistic. It will cost hundreds of billions of dollars. It will violate people's civil liberties.
So what does that sound like to you? Sounds like Jeb Bush fighting back. He's stepping up his attacks on Donald Trump's immigration plan these days. Bush seems to be going on offense against Trump after frequent broadsides by the real estate mogul, like Trump calling Bush a low-energy candidate and mocking his policy proposals as well as his campaign style. Let's bring in A.B. Stoddard, associate editor and columnist for The Hill. Charlie Hurt is a columnist for The Washington Times, and they are our political panel this morning. A.B., what about it? I mean, it seems that there has been a conscious decision made in the Jeb Bush camp to go after Donald Trump. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah. It's been reported that he's under pressure from donors and supporters who find him with the best national operation, the most money, and well-positioned as sort of the grown-up in the room. But what does that do when Trump still leads every poll in all the primary states and we're getting into the months closer up to the actual casting of ballots? It's time they tell him to fight back and to be a serious contender. I think that all of the sort of childish insults that Donald Trump has thrown at Jeb Bush and the other candidates are kind of a joke. But when he says Jeb Bush is low energy and it must be hard for him to get things done, that's very potent, and that's really a killer insult, because Jeb Bush is low energy. He said he wanted to run a joyful campaign. He doesn't look like he's having a good time when he's out on the stump. He needs to step it up. I think he risks fighting with Donald Trump. Donald Trump will fight back, but I think he was literally in a corner where his folks said, you need to do this or you look like you're lying down dead on the floor.
But, you know, Charlie, my experience in raising children is that sometimes when your kid is throwing a temper tantrum, you just ignore it. They decided, obviously, in the Bush camp that isn't working.
Yeah, and I think that they very much were hoping that they could sort of ride out August and get into September by just ignoring him, ignoring Trump, and that Trump would eventually go away. The problem is he's gone nowhere but up in the polls, and you know, the public, I think, very, very much tired of the regular politics and the politicians and the Bushes and the Clintons and everybody. They have really sort of rallied around and are enjoying this perhaps somewhat childish food fight. But I think that and AB, I think, raises a very important point. You know, the real problem for Jeb Bush is, and those attacks on him from Trump, they are truly devastating. The real problem for him is that if he wants to get down and dirty, he's not very good at getting down and fighting dirty. And the guy that he's going up against is extremely good at fighting dirty. And it's kind of a no-win situation, but they don't have a choice. They absolutely, at some point, somebody has to deal with Trump. And Jeb is obviously determined that it's going to have to be him.
Well, some of the other candidates have obviously tried, but as you point out, Jeb has the machinery in place, the maybe second runner status now to try and do that. Let's take another listen to some of the comments that Jeb Bush has been making about his fellow candidate.
You might want to read my book, Immigration Wars, which I published 4 years ago. I welcome Mr. Trump into the debate. I think that's great. He's serious, he's a serious candidate, and he ought to be held to what serious candidates need to be held to. He needs to be held to account for his views.
A serious candidate, AB. For a long time, there was hope among the rest of the Republican candidates that Donald Trump was a flash in the pan who would just sort of, disappear.
Right. I think that Jeb Bush is going to have to come up with some more pithy, punchier rhetoric when he talks about his immigration position. Look, Donald Trump's immigration plan is a complete and utter disaster. It is not going to pass the Congress. We are not going to round up 11 million people on buses and send them back home and then find an expedited way through great management to bring the great ones back. It is a joke. Jeb Bush has a lot to work with here. What he needs to do, to the Republicans who want to win the White House after many losses in a row, is say, we are not going to win the general election. We don't know who the Democrat's going to be, but we're not going to win. Demographically, it's not possible if we talk like this. We can't nominate someone who talks like this. It's an unrealistic plan, is too wimpy a sentence. He has to talk about why it won't work. And I think he's in a good position to do that. I think that what he's started to do, warming up in these few couple of lines, is not strong enough. He's going to have to get going.
Is it partly, Charlie, that people are looking for someone who talks tough, whether it be Donald Trump or one of the other candidates, that people are feeling that America has been sort of backsliding in the world and they want a tough-talking candidate?
Oh, I think absolutely, John. And this so much of the debate has centered around this political correctness, and all that is just about the way people talk. And that's what so many people love about Donald Trump, is that he does talk in that very plain way. Obviously, it's not always the most precise talk.
Well, and he's very short on details too. He'll just say, "I'll make America great again," but doesn't exactly say how.
Yeah, but much like the whole claim about hope and change that President Obama ran on very successfully, it allows people to kind of fill that void with whatever I'd like to make America great again. And you're thinking about all the things you'd like to see happen that would make America great again. And you're right. If he doesn't provide any specifics, then you just sort of put in there whatever you want. And it's obviously working very well. And I think it's also been a very positive. A lot of people are obviously wringing their hands. Republicans are pulling their hair out about all of this. But I would argue that it's actually been a very positive thing that it's gotten us talking about a lot of important issues that I don't think we really would have been talking about had it not been for Donald Trump and his unusual way of sort of stirring the pot.
And clearly Donald Trump is not pulling his hair out. Charlie Hurt, A.B. Stoddard, thank you.